There's a bag of white flour in every supermarket right now that's had all the goodness stripped out, then chalk mixed in. Because the law lets them. One healthy brown loaf on that shelf is really just white flour with a suntan, dyed a wholesome color and sold at the wholesome price. And half the different looking bags up there come from one company, a family firm no one's heard of, grinding more than a third of all the flour in Britain. Flour should be the one shelf they can't lay a finger on. Grain and a millstone. The cheapest, plainest, most honest thing in the building, pennies a bag, one ingredient, the stuff your gran turned into a warm loaf on a wet Sunday. You cannot improve on it, so they didn't try. Instead, they took it apart. Here's what they're banking on you not knowing. The word flour on a smart-looking bag is doing an enormous amount of quiet lying. There's a white flour in nearly every kitchen quietly spiking your blood sugar while the label calls it wholesome. There's a free-from bag they've talked half the country into that costs more than the good stuff and does less for you. And every reassuring word on those bags, strong, finest, wholesome, natural, falls apart the second you turn the packet over. The grain is still innocent. The plain bag of wholemeal on the bottom shelf is still the real thing. Still costs next to nothing. Still one of the best things you can eat. This was never about flour being bad for you. It's what they've done to it on the way to your trolley and how much they charge you for the damage. So here's the deal. I'm going to count down 7 flour brands I'd leave on the shelf, worst saved for last, and don't skip ahead, because number 1 is grinding the flour inside half the other bags on this list. And at the very end, the 5 honest ones actually worth buying, including the cheapest flour in the shop. Let's get into it. Think back to what flour actually was. A paper bag of the stuff, a tin with a windmill on the side. Your gran tipped it into a bowl, rubbed in a bit of fat, and within the hour the kitchen smelled of bread, enough to feed the whole family for the price of a stamp. No ingredients list worth reading because there was nothing in it. Wheat, milled. That was the deal for 1,000 years. Then, last century, the industry looked at the cheapest food in Britain and saw a problem. There's no money in honest flour. You can't put a fat margin on a sack of ground wheat that Aldi sells for £1. So they went to work not on the wheat, on you. They learned to take the grain apart. A grain of wheat is 3 things. The papery bran on the outside, the tiny germ at its heart where nearly all the goodness lives, the fiber, the oils, the vitamins, and the big, bland, starchy middle. White flour is that starchy middle, with the bran and germs sieved back out and sold off. Whiter lasts far longer and stripped of most of what made it food. Then, because they'd taken so much out, the law forced a little back: iron, 2 B vitamins, and calcium. 4 things to stand in for everything else they stripped. And they get to print enriched on that. Number 7, home pride. You know the one. The little bald man in the bowler hat and the smart city suit. Fred, they call him, wiping down the worktop, keeping everything just so. He's been on that flour since the 60s. He is British home baking. Your mum had him in the cupboard, you probably do too. Warm, familiar, safe as houses. Here's the thing about Fred though. He's for hire. The Home Pride name doesn't belong to a flour company at all. It's a trademark owned by Premier Foods, the food conglomerate behind Mr. Kipling and Bisto, and the flour itself is milled under license by a completely separate outfit called Cars. And Cars in turn is owned by a company called Whitworth Brothers. Hold that name Whitworth because it's the one we finish on at number 1, and once you know what Whitworth is, half this aisle looks different. So the friendly little man you've trusted your whole life is a logo, rented down a chain of owners, not one of whom is the chap on the bag. And here's the part that quietly gives the whole game away. Home Pride makes a real point, right on the front, of telling you its flour is 100% British wheat. Lovely. But stop and ask why a flour brand would need to boast about that. You only shout British wheat if you're worried the shopper might reasonably assume it isn't. That one proud little line is Home Pride accidentally telling on the rest of the shelf that plenty of the flour in that aisle, in bags that look every bit as homely, isn't what you'd assume at all. Keep that in your back pocket, we cash it in at number 3. There's nothing nasty in this bag. The flour's fine. The trick is the face on the front, 100 years of British, home, trust, painted onto a rented trademark, milled by a firm you've never heard of. That's not a family baker. That's a bowler hat on somebody else's grain. Buy it if you love Fred. Just know Fred works for the people who make your gravy. Quick ask before number 6. If this is useful, hit like and tap the hype button. Hyping a video is the single strongest signal you can send YouTube to put this in front of more shoppers. Number 6. The brown and wheatmeal bags, the healthy-looking ones. This is the flour you reach for when you're trying to be good. It isn't white, it's brown. It says wheatmeal or brown or multigrain or granary style. It looks like the sensible, wholesome choice, the one the doctor would nod at. That is exactly what it is counting on. So here is the law, and it's the sharpest fact in this whole video. There is only one word on that shelf that the law actually polices: wholemeal. For a flour or a loaf to call itself wholemeal, it has to be exactly that. The whole grain, bran and germ and all, nothing sieved out. That word has to earn its keep. Every other healthy-sounding word up there means legally nothing. Brown, wheatmeal, multigrain, stone ground, even the plain phrase wheat flour. There's no rule behind any of them. A brown loaf can be mostly white flour with the bran taken out and then tanned back to a wholesome colour with a splash of caramel and a little malt, the very same browning trick you'd find in a bottle of gravy colouring, and sold to you as the healthy one at the healthy price. It's white flour in a fake tan. And the giveaway is almost funny, real honest. 100% wholemeal doesn't need a single thing added to it because nothing was ever taken out of it. Remember, it's only the stripped white flour the law forces the iron and the chalk back into. So the honest wholemeal has a boring little label: flour and nothing else. The pretenders, the ones with white flour hidden inside, have to list all the bits they've been made to add back in, which means the healthier looking bag, the one with the longer, more fortified ingredients list, is very often the less honest one. The label is the flour confessing, and the Real Bread campaign went looking and found exactly that dodge on supermarket own brand wholemeal. That's not brown bread, that's white flour that's been to the tanning salon. Trust the one word that's legally binding and ignore the 5 that aren't. Number 5, the cheap own brand plain white flour, the 50-odd pence bag. Tesco, Asda, the value range, any of them. Now you might think this is the honest one. It's cheap. It's plain. It's just flour. No fancy claims, no gimmick, nothing to hide. That is exactly the trap, because this, the plain white bag millions of us buy without a second thought, is the swap in its purest form. Remember what white flour actually is: the starchy middle of the wheat with the bran and the germ sieved out and sold off, often as animal feed, or dried and sold back to you as wheat germ at a premium in the health aisle. And it takes the goodness with it, as much as 3/4 of the minerals, most of the fibre, and nearly all the vitamin E gone. What's left is, more or less, white powder. And here's the health part they'd rather you didn't dwell on. Grind wheat down to fine white powder and you've made something your body turns into sugar fast. A slice of ordinary white bread pushes your blood sugar up harder, gram for gram, than a spoonful of table sugar does. And the fibre and the germ that used to come with it, the part your gut actually wants, has been sieved out and sold off. The staff of life, stripped right down until it behaves inside you like a sweet. And then there's the chalk I told you about right at the start. Here's what it actually is. By law, because so much gets stripped out, 4 things are added back to every bag of white flour in Britain: iron, 2 B vitamins, and calcium. And the calcium they use is chalk. Actual ground chalk, calcium carbonate, the stuff of the White Cliffs of Dover, shoveled into the nation's flour since 1943. Now, I want to be straight with you because this is where a lot of scare videos go stupid. The chalk itself is not the scandal. Adding those nutrients back is genuinely a good thing. It's quietly headed off a lot of illness, and there's more of it coming. From this December, by law, they'll add folic acid too, which will spare around 200 babies a year from conditions like spina bifida. That is not the con. The con is that they had to add anything back at all, that they took a whole nourishing food, stripped most of the goodness out of it to make it white and long-lasting and profitable, dropped 4 back in, and stamped enriched on the front as if they'd enriched anything. Enriched compared to what? Compared to the thing it used to be, before they got to it. That's not enriched flour. That's a robbery with 4 coins handed back at the door. And the honest version, the whole grain, nothing removed, nothing to add back, is sitting right beside it on the shelf, which is exactly where we're heading at the end. Number 4, gluten-free flour. And this is the one from the price gap, the bag they sell you as the clean, healthy choice. Let me be completely clear before I start, because it matters. If you have celiac disease, gluten-free flour isn't a lifestyle choice, it's medicine, and you should absolutely buy it. This bit isn't aimed at you. It's aimed at the millions of people who've been quietly sold the idea that gluten-free simply means healthier, cleaner, better. It sits on the shelf with a health halo the size of a dinner plate and a price to match. So turn the bag over. What's actually in most gluten-free plain flour? Not wheat, they've taken the wheat out. What's left is a blend of refined starches, rice flour, potato starch, tapioca, maize. And here's the quiet truth of it. Those starches are, if anything, even more stripped back than the white wheat flour we just talked about. Barely any fiber, not much goodness. A blend of white powders that your body turns to sugar even faster. Nutritionally, for someone who doesn't need it, it's often a step down, not up. And you're paying, what, around £2 a kilo for it? Double a proper bag of wholemeal, 4 times the cheapest plain flour on the shelf. For a refined starch that, if you don't need it, is a step down from the flour you were already buying. More money for less food. That's the con at the heart of the whole free-from aisle. It has trained an enormous number of perfectly healthy people to pay a fortune for refined starch, on the strength of a word that means nothing to their bodies. Free-from has quietly become pay more, get less, dressed up as wellness. And here's the fairness, because there always is some. The honest end of this aisle is real. Brands like Dove's Farm make a genuinely good, organic, gluten-free range for the people who actually need it, and they don't dress it up as a health upgrade for everyone else. So if you need it, and buy the honest one. It's on our safe list. If you don't need it, you are paying premium prices for the most processed flour in the shop. That's not a health food, that's white powder with a halo, and a receipt to make your eyes water. Number 3. Hovis and Allinson's, the big-name bread flours. And this is where that little home pride boast from earlier comes home to roost. These are the strong white bread flours, the ones with the heritage. Allinson's wholemeal since 1892. Hovis, a name that's been on British bread for well over a century. You buy them to bake a proper British loaf. So let's talk about where the wheat in a British loaf actually comes from. Britain grows a great deal of wheat, but not always the right kind. To get the strong, stretchy gluten that makes a good high-rising loaf, our millers need harder wheat than our damp climate reliably grows, and a good slice of it is shipped in, much of it from Canada. Around 15% of the wheat milled in this country is imported, and strong bread flour is exactly where a lot of it ends up. So the most patriotic thing you can bake, a homemade British loaf, is very often rising on Canadian grain, behind a very British-looking bag. That's not fraud. It's just not the story the packaging is telling. Your British bag is a blend. But here's the bigger one, the illusion of choice. Look along that shelf and it feels like a proper market. Hovis over here, Allinson's there, Kingsmill on the bread, own brands underneath, choice, competition. Except as of this summer, several of them are the same company. In June, the competition watchdog waved through a deal that put Hovis and Kingsmill under a single owner, a giant called Associated British Foods, which already owned Allinson's. One conglomerate, now standing behind Hovis, Kingsmill, Allinson's and Sunblest. And the watchdog's own reason for allowing it, that ABF's own bread arm, the one that bakes Kingsmill, had been losing money for years and would likely quit the market altogether if the deal fell through. Read that back. The shelf looks like a contest. The regulator's own paperwork says it's barely a business. Now, Allinson's earns a partial pardon here, and an important one. Its plain wholemeal is genuinely one of the honest ones, and it's on our safe list at the end. Same brand, same owner, they can do the right thing when they choose to. It's the strong white, foreign blend, Hall of Mirrors game. That's the problem, not the wholemeal. And if 2 owners standing behind all those names already feels like a stitch-up, wait until you hear who's actually milling it. Number 1 is coming. Number 2, self-raising flour, McDougall's, and B-Row. And this one is personal because it's aimed straight at your memory. If you baked as a child or watched someone bake, these are the names. B-Row, that little recipe book, the one that's sold in the tens of millions, that taught half the country to make a Victoria sponge. McDougall's self-raising, the blue and white bag, Sunday afternoon fairy cakes. These aren't brands, they're childhoods, and that is precisely the asset being quietly cashed in. First, what they are now. Both of them are line items on the balance sheet of Premier Foods, the very same conglomerate we met behind Home Pride's rented bowler hat. The family names on the front, the northern heritage, the warm sense that somewhere there's a Mr. McDougal stirring a bowl. It's all packaging now. And the flour itself is honest enough. It's just plain flour with the raising agent already stirred in, a little bicarbonate of soda, and an acid salt, so your sponge rises without you adding anything. There's no trick in the chemistry, the trick is in the bag. Reach for the branded self-raising, the McDougals, the B-row, and then look at the weight. Where the supermarket's own brand self-raising still gives you the traditional bag of 1.5 kilos, the big trusted brands hand you around 1.1 kilos. That's a good quarter less flour than the shop's own bag sitting right beside it, for a higher price. On the strength of a name you've trusted since you were knee-high. You're not paying a premium for better flour. You're paying more for less of it because the packet reminds you of your nan. That's not a heritage brand. That's a memory with a lighter bag. If you love the recipe book, keep the recipe book and buy the own brand flour to bake from it. And number one, the one grinding the flour inside half the bags we've just been through, and the one almost nobody in Britain has ever heard of, Whitworth Brothers. I've saved this for last because it's the one that changes how the whole aisle looks. All the way through this video, we've been talking about brands. Home Pride, Hovis, Allinson's, the own brands, the fancy bags, different names, different colors, different prices, all lined up to feel like choice. Here is what that shelf actually is. Whitworth Brothers is a flour miller. You will never have seen an advert for it because it doesn't sell to you. It sells to them, the brands, and to the supermarkets. It's privately owned by one family quietly for the best part of a century. And it grinds more than 1/3 of all the flour in the United Kingdom. One firm. 1/3 of the nation's flour, the stuff in the branded bags, in all likelihood a good share of the own brand bags too, the stuff behind the little bowler-hatted man, pouring out of the same set of mills. And it's been swallowing the competition. Remember Cars, the company that actually mills Home Pride under license? Whitworth bought it. Remember Hovis, which used to grind its own flour? Whitworth bought a couple of its mills too, so the flour behind Home Pride, and a chunk of the flour behind Hovis, and 1/3 of nearly everything else, increasingly one company, one family, one set of millstones. Now stack that on top of what we found at number 3, the brands themselves collapsing into 2 big owners. So the choice on that shelf is a hall of mirrors. 2 companies own most of the names, and behind the names, one firm you've never heard of grinds 1/3 of what's actually in the bags. You thought you were choosing between rivals. You were choosing between labels on the same grain. And here's why that should bother you beyond the sheer principle of it. When a handful of players quietly control the one thing every loaf in the country is made from, nobody has to break a single law to leave you worse off. The recipe gets a touch cheaper, the wheat gets a little more imported, the bag gets a little smaller, the word on the front gets a little bolder. There's no villain twirling a moustache, just a market so concentrated that cheap enough to make and good enough to sell wins every single time, and you never once get a vote. That is the whole race to the bottom in a single sentence. Dozens of names, 2 owners, 1 miller, and a shopper who still believes they're choosing. Would your gran tipping her plain flour into a bowl ever have believed the entire nation's baking ran through so few hands? She'd not have credited it. That's not a market. That's a monopoly in fancy dress. And you've been paying the admission. So, the 5 honest ones. And here's the good news you might already have guessed. The safe list is also the cheap list. For once, doing the right thing costs you less, not more. One quick note before I name prices. These are what we found this week. They'll drift a few pence either way, but the verdicts won't. Start here because it's the whole point of the video. A plain bag of supermarket wholemeal flour, Aldi, Asda, any of them, is about £1 to £1.30 for a kilo. One ingredient, wholemeal wheat flour. The whole grain, bran and germ and all, nothing sieved out, nothing to add back, which is exactly why, by law, it's the one flour they don't have. The Fortify, because nothing was ever taken away. It's got the fibre, it's got the germ, it's got the goodness the white stuff had stripped out and sold off, and it is the cheapest flour in the shop. The single most honest product in this entire aisle is the plain bag on the bottom shelf, with nothing to say for itself and the lowest number on the ticket. That's not a coincidence. That's the whole con in reverse. If you'd rather a trusted name on it, Allinson's Wholemeal. Yes, the same Allinson's whose strong white I flagged at number 3. The plain wholemeal is the honest end of that brand, proper 100% wholemeal in every supermarket, a couple of pounds a bag. They can do it right. On the whole meal, they do. Now a genuine step up, and this is the one I'd love you to try. Matthew's Cotswold flour on the shelves in the bigger Tesco's now. A Cotswold family mill grinding British wheat, 8 generations of it by their own telling, and for its whole grain flours it still stone grounds the old way. The whole grain kept in, not sieved out. A real name British miller you can actually reach on a supermarket shelf, a couple of quid a bag. Go for their whole meal over the white and you're buying the whole grain, milled the way they've done it for 2 centuries. And if you want the gold standard, the least messed with flour you can buy in an ordinary shop. Bacheldra Watermill Stone Ground Wholemeal, which Waitrose carries for around £1.60 a kilo. It's milled by water on a spot where there's been a watermill since 1575, and it's certified organic. And hold that word organic because in about a minute it's going to matter more than you'd think. 1575. There's been a mill on that spot since before Shakespeare wrote a word, and it can still out-honest every shiny bag in the building for £1.60, or something you'll spot in any big supermarket with an organic label you already recognise. Dove's Farm and Waitrose's own Dutchy Organic. Both do a proper organic flour, white or wholemeal for somewhere around £1.70 a kilo. One fair warning, organic white is still white, so it's still fortified, and it isn't always British wheat. But organic means the one thing we're about to talk about didn't happen to it. And honestly, the best thing you can do with any of these is the oldest thing of all. Bake with it. A bag of strong wholemeal, water, yeast, a pinch of salt, and a Sunday afternoon, and you've a loaf that costs pennies, one you controlled from grain to plate with none of the fake tan and none of the shrinking bags. The cheapest flour in the shop, in your own oven, beats every fancy bag in this video. One last thing, and I'm telling you this so you've got the whole picture, not to scare you off flour, because flour is still the answer. There's a catch that touches even the good bag. To dry the wheat out before harvest, in our wet British summers, a lot of farmers spray the crop while it's still standing in the field with a weed killer called glyphosate. It kills the plant so it dries evenly and combines cleanly. The trouble is, sprayed that late, the residue can carry straight through, into the grain, into the flour, into the loaf. The European Union banned that pre-harvest spraying back in 2023. Britain kept it, and our bread wears the marks of it. The last time the government tested the nation's bread, 215 loaves out of 216 came back with traces of pesticide of one kind or another, and glyphosate is one they turn up again and again. Every trace within the legal limit they'll be quick to tell you, but the label doesn't have to breathe a word of it. And the scientists themselves don't all agree on what a lifetime of small doses adds up to. Here's the fix, and it's the same one, and it's still cheap. Buy organic. The organic rules ban that spray outright, and when they tested the organic loaves, they came back clean. Same honest flour, none of the spray. That's why I told you to hold the word. The plain bag your gran trusted was the honest one the whole time. They just worked out there's no money in leaving it alone. Tell me in the comments which aisle we should pull apart next. Your suggestions decide what we investigate. Subscribe and stick with me. We do one of these every week. And there's always another wholesome-looking front that doesn't survive a proper look at the back. Until then, buy the whole grain. Bake it yourself if you can, and never settle for less than you and your family deserve.